Hi, I am Malayna Evans, author of brand new book out this week, Aria Jones and the Guardian's Wedja, which is a sequel to my debut novel, Aria Jones and the Mummy's Ankh. I am here today doing a little book launch party in my own living room because that's how we roll. But because my favorite thing about book launches are the questions and answers, my fabulous son, Grayson,
hello everybody. How you doing?
Joined
today?
me, and he actually came up with questions for me because he's
Yes, I did.
kind of awesome like that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna hit you with questions.
Okay, good. Now I have to say, if I could only have a single person at my own book launch party, it would be Grayson. That's because when he was 9 years old, he told me that I should write a book about a kid like him lost in ancient Egypt. So he sort of inspired this entire adventure. So I appreciate you being here with me.
Thank you very much for that.
What kind of questions you got?
Much appreciated. Credit. First question I want to ask is because I don't really remember that day. That I kind of I've always felt bad for that, but I do remember always being really interested in Egypt when I was young, because I always knew how interested you were in it. And it's kind of weird that I've never asked you this, but why are you so interested in Egypt?
Why am I so interested in Egypt?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question, son. When I was in middle grade, I was a complete bookworm, and I read fantasy. And I think I just liked the idea of bigger worlds, a world a little bigger than I was raised. So it taught me kind of empathy, took me on adventures, and I think I sort of appreciated the fact that people live different than the way I lived. And I got really drawn to that concept, which led me to history. And originally I was super into Greek and Roman history, so I went and got master's degrees in Greek and Roman history. And one thing I learned when I did that is the things I started that I thought kind of started in Greece and Rome actually started in Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. So I went back and studied Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, got a second master's degree, and then because I absolutely fell in love with Egypt, I had a PhD in ancient Egyptian history.
Wow, that is a lot of history. I kind of forget that you did Greece and all the Eurocentric.
The more Eurocentric.
History before you got to Egypt. I kind of forget about that. Which also brings me to Soren, because we talked about how I
influenced the story,
the story a bit, and I also know that the characters Jagger and Aria are also inspired by me and Soren.
Yes.
What I've always wondered is, because I also know that they're not exactly the same as me and Soren.
Right.
I wondered how they evolved through your writing to get to where they are now after starting off with the base of me and Soren.
How did Jagger and Aria evolve from Grayson and
exactly.
Soren to Jagger and
Yes,
Aria? Yes. So the brother and sister relationship is completely similar. Even as it evolved, it kind of stayed within, he's an overprotective big brother. You are an overprotective big brother, so there's a lot there. But the characters, probably Jagger even more than Aria, definitely kind of took on their own stories. And they were inspired by you two. It started out kind of as writing my own kids on the page. But I'm a little bit of a pantser, so, you kind of listen to the voices you write, and your character becomes more authentic. And at some points, they were just their own fabulous selves instead of the two of you.
Right. And what about you? Do you have a character in the book that you wrote kind of thinking of yourself? Or if not, do you have a character that most aligns with your viewpoints and experience?
Ooh, that's a good question. Where am I in these books? The one place I guess I see myself, and this was completely unintentional, but when I wrote Jagger, he's super super smart, STEM kid. And of course, Aria is a very optimistic, kind of sassy character. When I wrote the first book, she was just optimistic. But when I started to write book 2, which is told from her point of view, I guess that's when I realized her optimism was kind of problematic in a way. That, like me, this is where I see me, is that sometimes things have been bad in my life, and I'm just like, oh, just be tough, keep going, don't stop. And that optimism can kind of trip you up. Sometimes you just have to stop and say, you know what, this isn't working, and, take your fail and try again. So Aria had to learn that the hard way, and I had to learn that the hard way. So I guess that's where I'd see me.
I see. I'm looking at that cover right now.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it. And I know you love that cover the second you got it.
I do.
But you weren't as happy about the first cover when you first got that one. I know that for
That's
sure.
true. the first draft of Jagger's cover, I did not love. But by the time we got to this cover, which is the cover that, then I did love it. But this cover I loved the second I saw it. And I think part of the reason is because when I wrote book 1, I think because I'm an Egyptologist, I wanted to tell people like these weird things about ancient Egypt that not everybody knows. Right. So I kind of did unexpected artifacts and sort of things like that. And it wasn't until it was done that I was like, man, I've got no pyramid. I don't have the Sphinx. Like the icons and symbols that everybody knows and loves were absent in book 1.
Right.
So I solved that in book 2. And I guess I just sort of love how clearly the cover flags that.
Yeah,
that's the action is around the pyramids. The Sphinx plays a part. And also, look at those awesome mummy costumes. Yeah. And if you can see, look, little mummy shadows on the bottom. Love. Yeah, it's my favorite part of the cover is the mummy shadows.
Get that Egyptian vibe from that.
Yeah.
And what is the name of that second book that is going to be?
You don't know the name.
I'm trying to get you.
You're trying to get me to say. Yes, exactly. Let's see. Aria Jones and the Guardians, Wedja.
And the first name, the first name.
Jagger Jones and the Mummies, Ankh.
There we go. Wedja. That's how you pronounce
yes,
it?
Wedja.
I know that.
I know.
Definitely what you're saying, Wedja.
Wedja.
What does that mean?
So it means prosperity. The books are based. It's 3 books. Book 3 is coming out next year, and they are based on an ancient blessing, Ankh Wedja Seneb, which means may you have life, prosperity, and health. So I've kind of contrasted modern and ancient notions of life in book 1 and prosperity in book 2.
I see.
And you have to read to understand why, I guess.
That's a lot of thinking that you put in the I gotta say, it's been really fun for me and Soren, to watch you grow into the writer that you've been right now.
Aww.
You've been doing this for a long, long time, and it makes me wonder, what is your favorite thing about writing? Because I've watched you grow for the past, like, probably 5 years. You're very different writer than you are when you first started.
That's true.
I can tell that from even watching just from a distance. So what would you say is your favorite thing?
You know what's also kind of funny is when I first started, you and I wrote this book so much together at the beginning, and you were my beta reader. You were so involved, and then you dumped me for years. And the manuscript, now you're being my beta reader again. So thanks for coming back to me. I appreciate that, son. What do I like the most? That was the question?
Yes.
I think that probably 2 things I like the most. One is once you get published, you get writer friends, or even before, like through SCBWI, which is who I'm doing this for. Like, I think over the years I've developed writer friends, and that's great, partly because I like them, but also, you get feedback and stuff, and that's super helpful. And then I've loved going to middle schools and talking to kids about ancient Egypt. I mean, it's kind of my thing, and so that's super fun for me.
Yeah, you've done a lot of that.
I've done a lot of that.
Done a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think the last question I'm going to ask today, which is going to be the hardest question probably, because especially as an author of both books, if you had to choose one, what would you say is your favorite book?
Ooh, you're going to ask me to choose between my babies?
Yes. And which one do you think demonstrates the most growth in you as a writer?
Definitely. I think book 2 is a little bit better. I think you could sort of see me evolving as a writer. So I would say that. But my favorite, it's hard to choose. That's a hard question. But I would actually also say book 2, only because book 2 is a prophecy book. There's the gods give these kids a prophecy, and then you have to go figure out what the prophecy is. And I just love a good prophecy book. Yeah. So I guess I'm just going to give it the win.
Right. I see.
That's your last question?
I was kind of expecting you to say the first one.
Oh, the first one, your first book I think is always going to be super special. Look at you on the cover. Yeah. That just looks just like him, by the way.
I feel like should just be your favorite
just because you're in. It is, I'm dedicated to you.
Fair enough.
That's nice, isn't it? You're so welcome.
I also appreciate you letting me ask all these questions.
I appreciate you coming to my party. This party together was a lot of fun. Next time I'll bring cupcakes.
Proud to be here.
Appreciate you. All right, you want to say goodbye to the people?
Goodbye, people.
Bye, people.